your offspring after you throughout their generations for an everlasting covenant, Berit Olam, to be God to you and to your offspring after you. The word of God for the people of God. So those of you who have been around long enough to know these folks, you might remember both Wes and Ruth Carlson. I didn't get to know Wes very long. He passed away within the first year that I was here in 2012. I had enough time to chat with him some and get to know that this is a guy that everybody surely respects. He just had kind of that bearing about him. Ruth I got to know much better. She actually, before heading off for a longer stint where she lived in Florida for a while before coming back, she was attending the Wednesday morning sermon review back when we were doing that, and sweet, sweet lady. Within this last year, Ruth passed away. We did her service here. It was a lovely service and tribute. And when that service was over, her grandson, who's named after her husband, Wes, his name is Wesley, and his then fiancée, Veronica, approached me and said, "Would you be willing to do our wedding?" I said, "Oh, that would be delightful." I said, "So when is it?" And they said it was September 6th, which of course was yesterday. And I remembered I had already bought tickets for Sarah and I to do the Alison Krauss concert. So sort of with fingers crossed, I said, "And what time would the service be?" And they said, "Well, I hope this is okay. It's a little weird, but we want to do it early at 12:30. And I said, "Yes!" And so it all worked out lovely. That service was yesterday. It was a simple, sweet, marvelous wedding, and it was such a privilege to feel almost as though I was helping to bring Wes and Ruth's presence into the service, even though they have gone on before. So the rehearsal for the service was on Thursday, which is another lovely thing. I'm always willing, when there's a rehearsal and they need it to be on Friday, even though that's my day off. Those things are flexible. It's like it's a wedding. Weddings, funerals, those things take precedence. But when somebody tells me, "Oh, and I hope you don't mind, our wedding rehearsal is Thursday," it's lovely. So it was Thursday. We did the rehearsal. It was great. Veronica, the bride, knew exactly what she wanted, told everybody to go to their places. We whipped through it in no time flat. It was just nice. We were able to, the rehearsal only took about 30 minutes. 10 minutes later, we were sitting in the restaurant for the rehearsal dinner. It was fantastic. But I have taken in the last several years to at least signing my part of the license at the rehearsal. And there's a whole story behind why that is a better thing to do. And if the couple is okay with doing that as well, I go ahead and have them do. And if the photographer needs to do a little reenactment or whatever, nobody knows the difference, and that works out fine. So they were glad to do that, have one less thing to worry about the day of the wedding. And we were at the back of the chapel after the rehearsal, and Veronica had said, "I've been practicing my new signature," right? So she had practiced the new signature, but she hadn't practiced printing just yet. And so on the first one, she got Veronica out all right, and she got about 3 letters into DeLang before she realized it was supposed to be Carlson. And she looked up at me, panicked, and said, "What do I do?" And I said, "Well, there are 2 copies for a reason." You keep that one for a good story, and the one you've practiced you send into the county so you're all set. And she laughed and thought that was a great story, and she carpenters erased the DEL, right, and then wrote out Carlson. And then as she was signing, and we were still laughing about that, she got all the way through Carlson just fine, except that she was so used at the end of DeLang, the N had a G after it, that when she got to the N of Carlson, she threw a G in at the end. And we had a good chuckle about that, and I said to Wes, "Maybe you should change your name. Carl Song sounds kind of neat." And they laughed, and the second copy is just fine that got sent into Macomb County. But, thankfully for Abram/Abraham, he had no official documents to worry about with his name change, right? He and Sarah did not have a marriage license that had to be changed, no driver's license, no social security cards, none of that sort of thing. You don't have to worry about official documentation. But much like the marriage license and the marriage covenant, the name change meant a difference in relationship. The same way that now Wes and Veronica would be in a different covenant, so Abraham, and God would now be in a different covenant. And maybe Abraham wished all he had to do was change his name on a few documents, because there is a lot to that relationship change. All of a sudden now, what he had thought of as his family, his closest kin, and his father's household, now it was the whole people were his family. His whole relationship to faith and to faith community was different. No longer was this the God of Ur from where he had come, or the God of simply of Canaan to where he was going. This God, instead of being located in just a place, was the God of the entire world. His notion of faith had changed. And his whole relationship, not just to everybody around him, but to posterity, was changed. Right? No, now everybody was going to be blessed through him. And to this day, all the folks who call themselves people of the book, whether Jewish or Christian or Muslim, we all find our common heritage in this one man, Abraham. Whoa. That's amazing. All from a little name change. Now, we don't tend to do it as Protestants, although I wouldn't mind doing it. It's kind of cool. Our Catholic sisters and brothers, for as much as sometimes we give them grief over silly little things, they have wonderful traditions that they have kept on from the early church that sometimes we Protestants have let drop. And one of those is that at baptism, each child, if any of you were baptized Catholic, you probably have a baptism name, right? You're given a new name. And you still keep your other one for other stuff, right? It just becomes your official baptismal name, your church name, usually taking a name of one of the saints. And in that name change is a very similar sort of change in the relationship between the person, whether child or adult, whenever you're baptized, and God and the greater community. Now, even though we Protestants don't give out special names, that covenant change still happens, but it's less about changing names and more about laying claims. God lays a claim upon the baptized person's life. If it's an infant, that infant will have to grow up and decide whether or not she or he is going to live into that. But God does the claiming first, right? I claim you as my daughter or my son. I claim you as my child. And if you choose to live into that relationship, it's going to change everything. It's going to change your family. It's not just going to be mom and dad and siblings and grandparents. It's going to be all those people out there in the congregation who are taking vows along with either you or your parents. That becomes family. Your understanding of the faith community will go well beyond even that little notion of family, but everyone in congregations throughout the country, throughout the world, throughout time are going to be your faith community. And wherever in the world you are born, under whatever flag, your primary allegiance is now going to be to this other kingdom, God's kingdom. Mind-blowing stuff. All from the change of a name or the laying of a claim of baptism. Isn't that amazing? And the other sacrament, along with baptism, which is communion, makes a similar claim. I don't know that we always think about that when we come to the table, but think for a moment as those first disciples, those first apostles, all gathered on the one side of the table so somebody could take a picture. Oh no, that's not really what happened, right? Even though that's what it looks like in Da Vinci's Last Supper. They gathered around that original triclinium table for a meal, a Passover meal, that was usually a family, blood family meal. But now, other than Peter got to hang with Andrew and James got to hang with John, so there are a couple sets of brothers there. But otherwise, these are all different folks. But they are now gathered at the table, family. Oh, wow. And then Jesus blows their mind by when everything seems to be over, all the stuff you're supposed to do for Passover, all the questions that are asked in the rehearsing of the Exodus story. He picks up a cup that's supposed to just sit there. Nobody's supposed to touch this cup because it's waiting for Elijah. And he picks up the cup and he offers it to them to drink from. This cup is the cup of the new covenant poured out in my blood. And they're going, huh? What? And then bread that was reserved. It's called the afikomen now when our Jewish sisters and brothers do Passover meal. I'm not sure. It probably didn't have that name back then. And he broke it. And he said, and this is my body, which is given for you. Whenever you have this meal now, not only will you remember the Exodus, but you will remember me, and you'll remember things that you haven't yet seen because they're coming up in just a day. Things that will deliver you from a different sort of slavery. The whole notion of faith community has expanded, not been replaced, but expanded. And he says to them, and I'll not drink of the fruit of the vine until the coming of God's kingdom. Whoa. Doesn't matter where in Roman Palestine they are from the Galilee in the north or Judea in the south, even Samaritans in the middle, if they want to come and be a part, they'll be a part. But no longer do any of these places matter. It won't matter even if you're on the other side of the Sea of Galilee where those crazy Gentiles are hanging out. Or all across the Mediterranean Sea and Turkey and Greece and all the way to Spain and all across the world, it won't matter. You'll now be a part of God's kingdom. Wow. What would it mean for God to change your name? Have an extra little ha in there. How might your notion of family expand? How might your notion of faith community expand? What does it mean if our primary allegiance is not to any one family or any one community or any one congregation or even any one country, but to all people of all time, that God would gather into one amazing kingdom around the table? Oh, bless the Lord, oh my soul. What a marvelous reality that could be if we, like